Welcome to a new time. Welcome to a new era.
This ain't WCW. This ain't Monday Night Raw. This ain't SmackDown. This ain't even WWE. Feel the wrath of the Pythons. You shall feel the wrath of Hulkamania. This is where the power lies.
And that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so.
He put hard times on Dusty Rhodes and his family.
I got a 66 and 2/3 chance of winning because Kurt Angle knows he can't beat me and he's not even going to try.
It's time to step into the squared circle and get it done.
Hello everyone and welcome to officially episode one of the Legends and Champions podcast. My name is Andy Evans, coming to you from the United Kingdom, and this week we are talking all about WCW Nitro, in particular the pilot episode. But in order to do that, we're going to be looking back at some of the Monday Night Wars, going to be going in depth on some of the stories that made WCW what it was. That's all to come. We're going to go to a quick break, and when we come back, let's go Nitro. Welcome back to the Legends and Champions podcast. On September the 4th, 1995, the world of professional wrestling changed in an instant, and it was thanks to the vision of one man, Eric Bischoff. Well, I say one man. I mean, you see, the story behind the creation of Nitro is, well, it's an interesting one, and there's been plenty of resources and books and documentaries and TV series over the years where that's been detailed. So I'm going to do it as quick as I can. You see, Bischoff himself has said in multiple WWE documentaries like the Monday Night Wars that he was called into a meeting with Ted Turner, and he was asked by Turner, what do you need to do to compete with the World Wrestling Federation? They were, and they still are, obviously, the standard bearers, the flag bearers of professional wrestling. And Bischoff, who quite honestly wasn't expecting this, said, give me prime time. And Turner turned around and he looked at the executive from WCW that was in the room, and he went, Scott, give Eric 2 hours on TNT. Anyone who's seen that Monday Night Wars documentary will know that Bischoff does an impression. I tried to replicate it. Didn't quite work, but there you go. But the rest really is history. The launch of Nitro began a period in professional wrestling which was known really as the golden era. It was the Monday Night Wars. And, you know, every old school fan knows what it's all about. And it's thanks to the Monday Night War, really, how we got the Attitude Era within the WWF. But no one expected for Nitro to become the monster that ultimately it turned out to be. For over 83 consecutive weeks, Nitro dominated the ratings, smashing the competition, completely destroying Monday Night Raw. Now, let's be fair, that could have been down to some of the dirty tricks which Bischoff and company did, such as giving away the tape results from the taped editions of Raw, or the controversial things such as Medusa throwing the World Championship into the belt, or even that famous quote by Tony Schiavone, who criticized Mick Foley for winning the championship with the, that will put bums on seats. But in all honesty, it's down mainly to one thing: the formation of the NWO, the New World Order, which was, of course, led by Hollywood Hulk Hogan and that whole era of the outsiders coming in. As I said a few minutes ago, beginning in June of 1996, Nitro beat Raw for 83 weeks and forced then owner of the World Wrestling Federation, Vince McMahon, to usher in a new era, a more adult-focused and dominated type of programming called the Attitude Era. It wasn't until April of 1998 that Monday Night Raw would actually win a battle. And then from April until November of that year, both shows would go back and forth, but ultimately it was Monday Night Raw that came out on top. Now, this show isn't about the Monday Night Wars, or even the NWO, or even the Attitude Era. We're going to be touching on those in separate sections, but it's important to remember why and how Nitro came into existence. And also it's important to recognize that the impact which it has on the wrestling industry. So when we come back, we're going to be looking more into the pilot episode of WCW Nitro, which you can watch on the network internationally, or if you're in the USA, on Peacock. See you after this.
Michael Jordan's got his restaurant in Chicago. Coach Don Shula of the Miami Dolphins, he's got a steakhouse. But WCW's own World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan, he's got Pasta Mania in the Mall of America. I want to try to get a word with him if I can squeeze in there. Hulk Hogan coming up. Debut edition of Monday Nitro. You've got Big Bubba in the main event.
Who's the greatest wrestler in the world? You know something, Eric Bischoff? Tonight on Monday Nitro, Pasta Mania has got all my Hulkamaniacs running wild. And I've eaten so many Hulkaroos and Hulky-Oos, I kind of feel sorry for Big Bubba, brother, because tonight, brother, first time on TNT, I'm putting the WCW heavyweight title on the line. And with Pasta Mania running through my brain, who's going to beat Big Bubba tonight, Hulkamaniacs? And when I'm done dragging him around the Mall of America and all my Pasta Maniacs are tearing their WCW shirts off, brother, I'm going to give Big Bubba a dose of my Hulkaroos up there, and then I'm going to body slam him again. You know, with little Hulkamaniacs like that, Pasta Maniacs all around the Mall of America, Big Bubba, you better tighten up that waistline, brother, because the Hulkster's slim and trim. I've been eating my Pasta Mania, and what you gonna do in the Mall of America, brother, when Hulk Hogan, Pasta Mania, and all my Pasta Maniacs run wild on you? What's he gonna do? All right.
If you like McGuire on Wrestling, you need to subscribe to the free McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed. Not only do you get access to the show a day early, but you also get free bonus content every week. Share a laugh with Mitch and Dimitri on the alternate commentary table.
Oh, I'm Cody Rhodes. Look at me.
Now, if this was Damian Priest, he'd apologize. He probably would have apologized.
Follow along with the film career of one of wrestling's biggest stars with We've Seen a Movie.
Basically, I'm just watching John Cena play his wrestling character.
If John Cena was a raging alcoholic, Atlantic City mooched before this.
Get all these shows, exclusive interviews, and more for free by subscribing to McGuire on Wrestling, wherever you get your podcasts.
So the premiere episode of Nitro was held at the Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota, and aired live on September the 4th on TNT, running for around 60 minutes. The show was heavy on action, with several matches featuring some of the top WCW performers of that time, most notably the immortal Hulk Hogan, the Icon Sting, and the Nature Boy Ric Flair. But surprisingly, the main takeaway that everyone had about Nitro was the unexpected debut of one Lex Luger. Now, why was it unexpected? Because only 24 hours earlier, Luger had competed in his last WWF match. So how did this all come about? Well, let's take a look. You see, throughout 1995, from January, Luger had been working technically as a free agent with the World Wrestling Federation. He hadn't re-signed a contract, but he also hadn't told McMahon. Now, you would have expected the WWF to have known this, right? And so would I. To be quite honest, a multinational company, multi-growth company, massive revenue, you would expect them to know it within talent relations. But we have seen many occurrences over the years, not just in the WWF, but within WCW, within TNA, where talent contracts have been missed. So to keep a long story short, Sting was pushing backstage to bring in his best friend Luger to WCW to be a part of this new movement of where the big boys play. Bischoff has recalled in several interviews that actually he was less than inclined to do this, but as a favor to Sting, he had conversations with Luger and offered a lowball deal, to which Luger initially declined. Now, it's fair to say that in 1995, things weren't going too well for WCW. They were in a bit of financial trouble. They were yet to turn a profit, and they were always in the red. And because of that, they had to release several talents, including the natural Dustin Rhodes, who would go on to great success as Goldust in the WWF, Paul Roma, and the legend Harley Race. But they were still insistent that they wanted to get to that next rung on the promotional ladder. And the offer which they originally made to Luger initially was around the $50,000 to $62,000 mark. Now, most people would be sat there going, yeah, great, sign me up, why not? But this was actually substantially less than what Luger was making in 1991 when he was in WCW, which was around, and this is a rough estimate, the $500,000 mark. So he's had an offer, he's had it lowballed, and as it stands, he's out. He's not coming to WCW. He's not going to be a part of Nitro. But then things changed. Vader was suspended. And this happened at a TV taping of WCW Saturday Night on the 30th of August, 1995. And if you heard about this, you will know that it was a legitimate fight backstage between Vader and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. And the ramifications of this were, they were huge, right? Vader was immediately suspended from WCW. And at the time, he was the second or third highest paid performer on the roster, earning approximately $500,000 per year. So being placed on an unpaid 6-month suspension instantly gave Bischoff some financial relief. $250,000 financial relief, to be exact. With the disciplinary action going on, Vader was told that he would be on this suspension for 6 months, and he rejected it. He didn't want to have this as the disciplinary sanction, and that led to him being released from WCW and ultimately going on to sign with the World Wrestling Federation in January 1996. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. That's a whole other story. So let's go back to Luger. Whilst this was all going on, he was talking to other companies, including New Japan Pro Wrestling, who offered him a contract more suited to his money requirements and the amount of dates that he wanted to work. Bischoff is a businessman, and he got wind of these negotiations, and based on now having some more readily available cash, thanks Vader, made a 2-pronged contract offer which really leveraged the relationship that WCW had with New Japan at that time. Luger was offered a reported $270,000 guaranteed contract from WCW and an additional $100,000 contract from New Japan, which, even though means he wouldn't be making what he made back in 1991, it would be more than what he would be getting from Vince McMahon and the World Wrestling Federation, as well as being less dates and also being guaranteed, which is something which WCW had become well known for, or at least they would over the next few years. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why did the WWF let Luger appear at SummerSlam earlier in August? Well, let me tell you. Because between the dates of August the 19th and August 21, the World Wrestling Federation appeared confident that Luger was going to re-sign, so they reinserted him back into storylines. He also started working house shows again. Luger had been off TV since his former Allied Powers tag team partner, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, blindsided him and turned him heel. He was sent home under the guise of a medical emergency. Now, when Talent Relations felt confident that he would resign, they brought him back for SummerSlam, and he helped save then WWF champion Diesel from an attack at the hands of the challenger, King Mabel, in that main event. The following night, on August 28th, during an episode of Monday Night Raw, Luger took part in an interview with Vince McMahon, where Vince tried to explain why Diesel had struck him. Vince went down the path of saying that really nobody knew where Luger's loyalties were going to be or what side he was on following the betrayal of his partner, the Davey Boy Smith. King Mabel, and Sir Mo came out and confronted Luger, who said that if they were challenging him, they were ultimately challenging America. It is a fantastic interview, I think. Have you ever seen it? Have you ever seen this interview? No? Well, that's to be expected, because it has stayed in the vault of WWE headquarters and has never aired on TV, nor has it been released on the WWE network. Luger competed in a house show on September the 3rd of 1995, which was his last ever match in the World Wrestling Federation. He had secretly signed with WCW, and 24 hours later, the biggest shock in wrestling occurred. I mean, who says wrestling isn't a soap opera? I mean, seriously, you just couldn't write this. This is what you would expect in Days of Our Lives or EastEnders or Coronation Street or The Apprentice.
I told Lex, don't go to the hotel where everybody else is staying. And don't show up until half an hour before you're supposed to go on the air.
And this crowd is live. They are wired.
They waited till like 30 minutes before the show started, brought me in with like towels around my head to a back door. But they didn't put me in position to go out on television until the moment I walked out.
Later on in this live debut broadcast. Oh, what in the hell is he doing here? Get the camera off of here. What? Look. Get him out of here. Get the camera off of here. What is this? Oh, wait a minute. He's got a right to be where this is a public mall. Get him out of here. Somebody call the security guards.
So let's get back to the premiere of Nitro. The one thing you instantly see on the opening video are the numerous shots of Vader, who, as I've just discussed, is now no longer with the company. And this actually led to some backstage issues, because he was originally supposed to face Hogan for the WCW World Championship on the second episode of Nitro, which would air on the 11th of September. But he was replaced by none other than, I'll let you think about it for just a second. That's right, Lex Luger. Yeah, Lex Luger got his title shot. Week 2, Nitro. Love long-term booking. Let's take a look at the action that took place from the Mall of America on that fateful September evening. And one thing that I did want to touch about in respect of WCW was the commentary team. You see, over on Raw, we'd gotten used to those dulcet tones of Vince McMahon and good old JR Jim Ross. And while this was actually entertaining enough, I have to say that the 3-man booth on Nitro was equally, if not more, entertaining. Eric Bischoff led the call, joined on color by legendary manager and Hall of Famer, the Brain Bobby Heenan, and the former NFL great and future member of the Four Horsemen, Steve Mongo McMichael, who was also joined by his dog. Well, it was a rat, but let's not go there. Mongo was unique. He brought his own style of entertainment. He was always entertaining, and I think he truly was entertained by what was happening in the ring and those storylines. He was the wrestling fan. He was us. You know, he projected that fandom across the microphone, that enthusiasm, that ability to actually, you know what, get things wrong. And he did. He got things wrong all the time. But that's what made him more entertaining. And really, Mongo was no stranger to professional wrestling, as maybe not by surprise, he had actually been a part of WrestleMania 11 earlier that year as part of Lawrence Taylor's All-Pro team. And it was no secret that the WWF were interested in him. But it was WCW who took the punt. No pun intended there. See, that's my American football gag. I had to get one in. Took the punt. I think that's right. I hope that's right. But I got one in. I got a joke in. And brought him in. I know nothing about American football, by the way. So, you know, I think I'm making a funny joke here. Maybe I'm not. WCW, anyway, brought him in as both a commentator and a professional wrestler. Make no mistake about it, though, that Heenan and Bischoff were the two lead announcers, and in most cases, I genuinely feel that it was Heenan who ran that booth, making sure that Bischoff was comfortable, feeding him the lines, and generally being Bobby Heenan that we all knew and loved. It was a great listen, and one that, being a former commentator myself, really played to telling the story in the ring and not taking away from the performers, whilst also making it entertaining for those who were watching from home. So what happened on Nitro? What actually happened on that debut edition? Well, things kicked off with a dark match, and it was the American Males, which was Marcus Bagwell and Scotty Riggs, defeating the team of Bunkhouse Buck and Dick Slater, who was joined by Colonel Rob Parker. Your opening contest, I sound like David Penzer here, was a match between Japanese sensation from New Japan, Jushin Thunder Liger, facing off against Flying Brian. That is my David Penzer impression. Flying Brian Pillman, who went over Justin Liger in the opening match in just under 6 minutes. And then was one of the most funniest and poignant memories of Nitro is the second match. And that was between Ric Flair and the Icon Sting. Because on March 26, 2001, on the final episode of Nitro, these two battled again, one last time, basically bringing the story of Nitro to an all-round close. Yes, they look different. Yes, Flair and Sting competed in T-shirts. The bodies weren't there. They were a lot older. But, you know, to see that story mark, to see that legendary feud between Sting and Flair kick off Nitro and end Nitro, there couldn't have been a better way to encompass everything. And your main event was Hulk Hogan defending the World Heavyweight Championship against Big Bubba Rogers with Jimmy Hart in Hogan's corner. And of course, Big Bubba Rogers was the big boss man in the World Wrestling Federation. The response to Nitro was absolutely massive. It scored a 2.9 cable rating and went unopposed to Monday Night Raw. Now, this was very clever because whilst Raw was being taken off air for the dog show, I think it was, Nitro could capitalize on that wrestling audience. It landed with a bang, and that was great marketing and promotion by WCW and Bischoff. Now, the trend would continue with both Nitro and Raw, both beating each other 7 times during the remainder of 1995 each. The September 11th episode, which saw Hogan defend the championship against, I don't want to say his name, I've said Luger's name more in this episode than I've said in about 20 years of podcasting, scored a cable rating of 2.51 compared to Raw's 2.22. Now think about it. They are quite low because as the Monday Night Wars was going on and WCW and Raw were going head to head, you were getting 4.5s, 5.2s, massive numbers. So for them to get a 2.9 and then a 2.51 in 2 weeks was a massive achievement by WCW. But the big thing to remember about WCW Nitro was that it was live each and every week. And we take this for granted now. You know, you think that most of the major wrestling shows that we watch, Raw, NXT, Dynamite, are live. But back in 1995, costs were astronomical, and the WWF were only going live every other week, with recorded episodes being aired in the gap just to keep cost down. And this allowed Nitro to develop a reputation as being completely uncensored, and no one knew what was going to happen or who was going to debut. And I think it's fair to say that WCW Nitro, in particular this premiere episode, should be regarded as one of the most pivotal moments in wrestling history. Up until this point, we were used to comedy, cartoon-style characters like Doink the Clown or Duke the Dumpster Drosy or Isaac Yankem DDS. But with WCW came a more sophisticated, modern approach. Bischoff had nothing to lose but everything to gain, and whether you like the man or you hate the man, He single-handedly changed the wrestling business, just like Vince had done back in the 1980s. And really, the reputation of Nitro continues to this day, with other companies adopting the same style that Bischoff had back in 1995, most notably that of Tony Khan, who credits WCW for his love of professional wrestling. And you can see the influences across all of the AEW products, including Dynamite, including Collision. And over the coming weeks, we're going to be doing more on the Attitude Era. We're going to be doing more on the Monday Night Wars and really more on Eric Bischoff. But I want to know what you think of the premiere episode of Nitro. What did you enjoy? What did you dislike? And where do you think Nitro sits within the landscape of modern professional wrestling? Let me and the team know on the Team MOW Facebook page. I really want to get your thoughts, and we will use them in future episodes. So that is Nitro. That is the premiere episode of WCW, and one that you can go back and watch now. And actually, with the ad breaks taken out, it's 45 minutes. But it's 45 minutes of pure nostalgia. It's an easy watch. It's a fun watch. And actually, I love going back to watch this because I can just sit down and watch a company come from the ashes like a phoenix and rise to take their place as legitimately the number one wrestling company for over 83 weeks. Coming up after the break, it's time to look back at this week in wrestling history. I'll see you after this.
Hey, yo, how many of you here came to listen to your same generic wrestling podcast? Or how many of you came to listen to the alternate commentary table every single Saturday?
You're going to get our perspective of what the real fans of wrestling think, and no one does it like us.
Subscribe and stream to the McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed anywhere where you're streaming your podcasts. Survey says one more for the Greek guys.
Chair shot.
Welcome back to this last part of this week's Legends and Champions, where we are looking back at the week in wrestling history. And for anyone who knows this segment or doesn't know this segment, it works like this. We take a week from the Sunday to the Saturday and look at some of the most pivotal moments that happened in history. And where we can, we will incorporate some audio footage just to bring it to life. And this week, we are looking at September the 1st through to September 7th. And kicking off on September the 1st, 1992, Ric Flair defeated the Macho Man Randy Savage to win his second WWF Championship. The match aired actually 13 days later on primetime in what is thought to be a first for a WWF World Title change. The original taping of the match was actually halted midway through due to Vince not being satisfied. The match was restarted and retaped immediately. Let's go to some highlights from that match.
Must be worried. Ric Flair must be worried. Why has Randy Savage not surrendered? You've got that look on your face, too. You've got the same look on your face. You can't believe it. Randy Savage against all odds. But wait, you don't. No. Randy Savage. He's blacked out. I think he's unconscious. Savage is unconscious. We did it! Woo! We did it! We did it! We did it! Perfect! You did it! Flair, you did it! With good wrestling ability! And oh, am I happy? Am I excited? Yes! 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 Oh, we're in the
It's kind of interesting when you think about what we've been talking about throughout this show in terms of WCW, because one of the things that really was prevalent was the WCW World Heavyweight Championship and that big gold belt. And on September the 2nd, 2002, following the undisputed WWE Champion Brock Lesnar's revelation that he actually would only be competing on SmackDown going forward, then General Manager of Raw, Eric Bischoff, introduced the World Heavyweight Championship as Raw's new main event level title, and it was awarded immediately to the game Triple H. What was said? Let's find out by going back to Monday Night Raw.
Your accolades here in the WWE are unbelievable, but you know what? They're about to become even bigger.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
What's in the briefcase is what I'm wondering.
Money? He's going to give him a money. Wait a minute. Look at this.
Triple H, you may recognize this world championship because you were the last man to officially wear it. It's been worn by some of the greatest champions in the history of this industry. And now, Triple H, it will be again, because, ladies and gentlemen, your new world champion, Triple H!
What? God, now this is an historic moment here on Raw. Triple H has just been awarded the heavyweight championship of the world.
Well, you heard what Eric said. He was officially the last man to wear that championship belt. This is unprecedented, isn't it, JR?
It is an historic moment. It is a shocking moment here on Raw. Triple H just awarded the world's heavyweight title.
We've seen a new world champion crowned here in the first 5 minutes of the show.
You know, Eric, a lot of guys would come out here and they'd say, God, what an honor, but I really don't deserve this. But then again, I'm not a lot of guys, am I? Because the fact is, you know it, I know it, and every single one of these people know it, that nobody deserves to be the world champion more than me. Nobody should be the world's heavyweight champion more than the game.
On September 3rd in 1984, we head over to WCCW World Class Championship Wrestling. The Fabulous Freebirds, which was Michael Hayes, Terry Gordy, and Buddy Roberts, lost the WCCW six-man tag team titles in an elimination handicap match to Kerry and Kevin Von Erich. The match was handicapped because a third Von Erich brother, Mike, was injured earlier on the card in a match with Gino Hernandez. Kerry was eliminated first before Kevin beat the 3-on-1 odds to sweep all three birds and win the match. One other thing to note about this was that it was also a loser leaves town and served as a write-off for the Freebirds, who moved to the World Wrestling Federation for a very, 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 very short stint. In fact, it was very short. It was like a cup of coffee. In 1989, the Great Muta, the Japanese legend, defeated Sting in a no DQ match in Atlanta to win the NWA World Television Championships. On September 4th, 2001, following a match between The Undertaker and Steven Richards on SmackDown, the former WCW World Tag Team Champions Chronic, made up of Bryan Adams and Brian Clark, made their debuts within the World Wrestling Federation by attacking The Undertaker. Now, don't get too excited, folks, because they didn't hang around very long. They lasted less than a month. Yeah. Gotta love the invasion angle. 2009, Ring of Honor issued a press release stating that both Bryan Danielson, the new AEW World Heavyweight Champion, and Nigel McGuinness would be joining the World Wrestling Entertainment. Whilst Danielson did join and went on to great success as Daniel Bryan, never did get the name change, McGuinness didn't end up signing due to health concerns. Instead, he went over to TNA as Desmond Wolfe before retiring from the ring. In 2017, he joined the WWE as a commentator, initially for WWE UK, held in Blackpool for the championship tournament in January of that year. And now you will see him on AEW television every week. And big congrats to Nigel McGuinness, who by the time you're hearing this, has now been 2 weeks since he returned to the ring at All In London. September 5th, 1990, Sting retained the WCW Heavyweight Championship, against the Black Scorpion, who was portrayed by Al Perez in the main event of Clash of the Champions 12. On that same day in 1991, in the main event of Clash 16, the Enforcers, Arn Anderson and Larry Zbyszko, defeated Rick Steiner and Bill Kazmaier to win the vacant WCW World Tag Team titles. In 2007, Andrew Martin, otherwise known in professional wrestling circles as Test, is released from TNA. He was with the company for less than a month. September 6 in 2005, we're going back to TNA Wrestling because they announced they had signed Gail Kim, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, women's wrestler in history. Kim would begin as a manager of Double J Jeff Jarrett and of America's Most Wanted, but went on to spearhead the history-making TNA Knockouts division and was named a Company Hall of Famer and an exec. In 2005, WWE taped the first ever episode of Friday Night SmackDown featuring the main event of Batista versus JBL in a bull rope match. Heading back over to TNA, this time in 2010, Jay Lethal defeated Doug Williams to win the TNA X Division Championship for the first time. 1 year later, in 2011, wrestler Little Tokyo passed away as a result of a heart attack, aged 70. Tokyo, whose real name was Shigeru Akabane, was best known to most fans for teaming with Lord Littlebrook and King Kong Bundy against the Haiti Kid, Little Beaver, and Hillbilly Jim at WrestleMania 3. And in 2014, the first ever episode of Lucha Underground was taped.
If you like McGuire on Wrestling, you need to subscribe to the free McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed. Not only do you get access to the show a day early, but you also get free bonus content every week. Share a laugh with Mitch and Dimitri on the alternate commentary table.
Oh, I'm Cody Rhodes. Look at me. Now, if this was Damian Priest, he'd apologize. He probably would have apologized.
Follow along with the film career of one of wrestling's biggest stars with We've Seen a Movie.
Basically, I'm just watching John Cena play his wrestling character.
If John Cena was a raging alcoholic Atlantic City mooch before this.
Get all these shows, exclusive interviews, and more for free by subscribing to McGuire on Wrestling, wherever you get your podcasts.
Rounding it off this week with September the 7th, and we are heading back to 1997 for WWE Ground Zero in Your House, which took place at the Louisville Gardens in Louisville, Kentucky. The main event of the show would be the first televised singles match between the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels and the Phenom The Undertaker. The match ended in a draw, which led to the famous Hell in a Cell between the two the following month. And I cannot wait to cover that Hell in a Cell match on an episode of LAC. Going to be brilliant. 2008 saw Unforgiven take place at the Quickens Loan Arena in Cleveland, Ohio. It was a monster-stacked card, with the most notable being the introduction of the Championship Scramble concept to contest the main titles of the three brands. And to this day, anyone who knows me, anyone who's done a podcast with me over the years will know that I loved these Championship Scramble matches. In the first one, Matt Hardy emerged victorious and walked out as the ECW champion. The match also included the defending champion Mark Henry, Chavo Guerrero, Finlay, and The Miz. Now, the rules for these were amazing. There was a clock, and every time you pinned someone, you would become the champion until you got pinned or submitted, and then that person would become the champion. When the clock finished, the person who was the champion would be the champion. Yeah. See why I love him? Triple H successfully defended the WWE Championship in the second scramble. He went up against Shelton Benjamin, Jeff Hardy, MVP, and the Brian Kendrick. And in the main event, CM Punk was supposed to defend his world title in a scramble against Batista, Kane, JBL, and Rey Mysterio, but he was removed from the match after an attack from Randy Orton and replaced by Y2J Chris Jericho, who won the match and the title. But it wasn't such a good night for Jericho, because earlier he had been defeated by referee stoppage in an unsanctioned match against bitter rival, the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels. The 26-plus minute match was one of the very best of the year in any company. And that's This Week in Wrestling History. One of my favorite segments, this one. I love it because you just get to go back in time and relive some of those greatest moments from wrestling's past. And, you know, if we're still doing this show in 10 years' time or 5 or 10 years' time, you know, there'll be a moment that we're seeing now going into this countdown. And, yeah, it's brilliant. Don't forget to join the rest of the team at Team MOW throughout the week. Join us on Facebook, and you can interact with some of the greatest listeners in the world ever. I love being a part of Team MLW. It's such a fantastic community to be a part of. And also, don't forget the Maguire on Wrestling podcast feed, because throughout the week you are going to be getting some amazing content. On Saturday, you get the alternate commentary table, which is Mitch and Dimitri. On Sunday, it's the man himself, Mike Maguire, with Maguire on Wrestling, featuring most weeks Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer. And you also have me on there as well. So stay tuned to the podcast feed. Some great things coming up. And if you haven't listened to it already, check out Mike's retrospective special on Leo Burke. It was a tremendous podcast, really emotive, and brought home the legacy of what Leo meant to wrestling fans, not just in Canada, but globally, and also the impact that he had, and we didn't realize it, on some of the more popular superstars of today. That podcast will feature interviews with the likes of the Hitman Bret Hart, Dave Meltzer, Rene Dupree, and Mark Henry. And coming up on the podcast feed will be the extended full interviews. They're crackers, well worth a listen. And that's just one of the things you will get on the Maguire on Wrestling podcast feed, absolutely free each and every week. So subscribe today. That's it for now. I'll be back next week. My name's Andy Evans. I will see you at the matches. Until then, so long, farewell, take care. Auf Wiedersehen. See you next week. Bye-bye.
This has been Legends and Champions with Andy Evans. Thank you for listening.